Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And I have a list going of topics that I want to talk about over here. And one of the topics that I added after my meeting on Tuesday night was talking about what keeps me, what do I put in between me and the drink? And it was actually something that me and my friend Tawny Jean talked about after the meeting as well. And it was like turned into such a great conversation. And you know, I think, like, if you're anybody in recovery, you'll know we talk about if you work through a 12-step program. We talk about steps, and we talk about resentments, and we talk about anger and fear and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But, like, sometimes we don't just, like, break it down to, like, the brutal, rigorous honesty of all of it. You know, sometimes we, like, talk with all these big words and things like that, which are helpful to me. You know, like, all of it's helpful to me. The slogans are helpful to me, and I've talked about that a lot. You know, I actually talked about that in my share on Tuesday night, that when I first got sober, like, one of the things that I put between me and the drink were slogans, you know, like, just for today. If you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got, you know? Keep it simple, stupid. Things like that. And I even shared in there, like, just for today, I had to break that down to, like, just for this hour, you know, I'm like looking at my clock right now and it's, you know, 4:04. And, you know, I would say to myself, I can remember the early days of sobriety. I would like have all my drug dealers' numbers out. I literally was like a 10-minute walk to the liquor store. And I would like sit there and I would look at the clock over the stove in the kitchen. And I was standing next to my phone with all these numbers out. And then next to my dealer's numbers, I had all these numbers that I gotten from people at meetings, right? And I'd be like, okay, if I can just make it to 4:30, at 4:30 I can walk down to the liquor store or I can call one of these dealers. And I would call all these numbers. It was almost kind of like a game. I play with myself like a test. And I was like, I'm going to call all these numbers of people that I got at meetings. And I would call and I would call. And finally I would get a hold of somebody, you know. Sometimes people would come over and they would sit with me. Sometimes people would come and pick me up and be like, I'm getting you out of the house. I'm getting you out of your head. You know, it was that kind of stuff was what I was putting between me and the drink because I needed that distraction in early sobriety. Today it's different, and so the idea of what do we put between us and the drink, what I mean in referencing that, or what that saying means is, like, what am I putting to stop me from picking up that first drink? And the saying is, you know, that one is too many and 1,000 is never enough, meaning that after that first drink, I'm off to the races, which I've always kind of known that. Like, I've always known that, like, I've said to people, I believe that I could probably, this is just my truth, and I know that some people aren't going to understand this, right? I could probably go into a bar, I believe this, I could go into a bar and I could order my favorite drink, which was a double Jack and Coke back in the day. I could sit down at the bar, I could drink the bar, I could put it down and walk out and leave. I do not believe that me sitting there and drinking that drink, that I'd be like at that bar like 6 hours later, like, come on now, come on, one more round. I don't think I would be like that, okay? I don't know though. I could. I don't know, right? But what I do know is, okay, after 29 years of sobriety, which the number one thing for me that I put between me and my drink is that I'm not willing to throw that away. I'm not willing to throw away my marriage, my relationship with my dog, my relationship with my best friends, especially a relationship with my family that I've repaired. I put all of that between me and the drink, right? And what I do know is, and so I want to make this clear, if I sat down at that bar and I had that drink, okay, do I believe that I could physically drink that drink and walk out? Yes. But that's dangerous to start thinking along that way, because what I know as a fact is that it wouldn't even be about that drink. As soon as that first touch of whiskey hit my tongue, I'm done. Okay, I'm done. Because it's really not about that one drink and proving it to myself. And I think this is where a lot of people that I've seen that have gone back out where they start, it's then proving to themselves that they can have a glass of wine, or they can have a beer, or they can have one joint, or they can maybe smoke pot, or they can maybe, and whatever. And maybe you have to go through that. I don't know what everybody else's journey is, but I know for me, and this is where the rigorous honesty comes in, that I have to be 100% honest with myself, right? I know that in that second, okay, that I decided to pick up that drink. I chose that. I decided, okay? And I put that drink back and that whiskey hits my tongue. I know in that moment, I've thrown away 29 years, okay? With that, I also know that I've probably thrown away my relationships, my marriage, because I can tell you right now, it's not about that first sip. To me, it's about all the things that are out there in the world. We were talking about Mike's Hard Lemonades in the meeting the other night, right? Like, and I've never tried Mike's Hard Lemonade. And I know this is probably funny to a lot of people, but I can remember, like, back in the day, like, I mean, I got sober in 94, you guys, okay? I mean, it was as exciting as it got, was, like, Red Stripe beer was exotic, okay? And Amstel Light was like really exotic. I mean, we didn't have the IPAs, you know, we didn't have like all these different, like, we didn't have White Claws. I mean, we had Zimas, okay? And those were disgusting, even though I drank them sometimes. But, you know, we had all, that was it. We had Bartles and James wine coolers. If you wanted to make a mudslide, you couldn't buy it in a bottle at a grocery store. You had to buy 6 bottles, you know? If you wanted to make margaritas, you couldn't buy a lime-a-rita in a can at a gas station. You had to buy all this shit to make a margarita and a lime-a-rita or whatever. I don't even know what a lime-a-rita was, but somebody was talking about that. So, you know, like, we had to buy all that stuff. Then somebody had to bring the blender over, okay? And then you had a party. You'd have a margarita party. Everybody get drunk, and then you ended up just doing shots of tequila anyway, right? To me, it's not about that drink. It's not about proving to myself that I can have that drink. I know that I can have that drink and walk out of the bar, but after that first sip, I'm done, okay? Because I want everything else that's out there. I want to try all the pills I've never tried. I want to do all this kind of stuff, and that's dangerous, see? Because that addict is still inside of me. That's how close I am to that drink, you know? Several years ago, I was going to a lot of the same meetings, and my sponsor, who has since passed away, and he was sober when he passed away, he had like 42 years, yeah, he had 42 years. His sponsor had 44 years. So when he passed away sober. But he suggested to me, he goes, I think you need to start going to some new meetings where you don't know anybody. And I was like, why? And he was like, I think you're getting comfortable. He was like, and I think you need to be reminded how close to the drink you are. This is after, like, there were 4 years that I didn't go to meetings. I came back in. I'm going to adjust this real quick. Hold on. I came back in, and then I was going to meetings like 14 days a week, but I was going to a lot of the same meetings, right? And so towards the end of that 2 years that I first came back, he was like, I think you need to go to some other meetings. Well, I started going to a lot of other meetings. I don't really talk a lot about this, but there was probably 3 years of my life. I actually got a new sponsor during that time, who's still a very dear friend of mine today. I started going to a lot of meetings where there were a lot of homeless people that came. I actually went to a meeting that was in a homeless shelter, and I was around a lot of people that the drink, it wasn't about what they were putting between them and the drink. It was about the drink was an answer for them. And to be in that environment and to realize after so much time sober that, but for the grace of God and one drink, I could be exactly in their shoes. And to know that, right? Like, speaking of peanut butter sandwiches, you know, like I had, was I speaking about peanut butter sandwiches or was that my last video? Anyway, I think I was, but anyway, this guy that has become a very dear friend of mine, you know, and he would like just come to this one meeting, and he said the reason that he would come to this meeting was because he could like dip into the kitchen at the shelter and he could like make himself a peanut butter sandwich, and that would be the only thing that he would eat during the day, right? Oh no, I just did my weight loss video. I was talking about peanut butter. That's why I was talking about that. See, I'm like, the videos are all flowing into each other. But, you know, he would say to me, and I remember, like, when, like, my friend Tanya and I were talking to him, and he was like, yeah, like, the reason I come to this meeting, because it was, like, this late candlelight meeting, and he was, like, 10:45 to, like, midnight, and he would say, the reason I come to this meeting is because the kitchen is closed down at the shelter, and I can dip in there, and I can make myself a peanut butter sandwich or two, and that's the only meal that I get throughout the day. Well, that puts your life in perspective. That puts your sobriety in perspective. Like, how grateful am I today that I'm sober and I have a pillow to put my head on at night and a home to live in and food to eat and clean water to drink, okay? When a friend of mine literally is dipping into a kitchen at a shelter at a meeting, the only thing that's getting him to that meeting is that peanut butter sandwich because he might not eat if it's for that day. My whole life changed around that. My whole life changed around that, okay? Because it was no longer about, for me, like, wanting to go to a meeting, or I don't want to go to this meeting, or whatever. It was about, these people, like, they have, like, they see it as, like, this, they get to go to a meeting, right? It right-sized me. It changed my life. And that was why my sponsor wanted me to start going to those meetings. He's like, you're too comfortable, you know? You're taking your sobriety for granted. You need to go be around some people who are fighting for their sobriety a little bit more, like you did when you first came in here. Because when I first got in here, you know, that was what I did. I used to go to a lot of those meetings back in the day when I first got sober. My home group back in the day no longer exists, so I can say this. But one of my home group meetings my home group when my first year sober was in a different program that I'm in today, and it was called Hope in the Hood. And it taught me of, like, how the struggle of everybody, you know, like, and the other meeting that I went to was called Just Got Paid. It was by the song, Just Got Paid Friday Night. It was on Friday night. And, you know, and it was in a different program as well that I'm in today. And, you know, a lot of the meetings that I went to in early sobriety, I saw a lot of struggle. And what my sponsor was saying to me is, you're around a lot of people today that have gotten their lives back, and they've been sober for 10, 15, 20 plus years, right? Like, you need to be around people that are fighting again. Well, when I was, and I went back and I was around those people, right? Like, it was really eye-opening to me. You know, in other states, they call those Skid Row meetings, right? But for me, it was eye-opening. And, you know, just to be sitting there and sharing space with these people was such an honor, that they shared their stories, they shared their lives with me, you know? And so many of those people that I met during that 3-year period, I, like, consider just really great friends of mine today. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be part of their life and be part of their journey. And I hope that they feel like the same way, you know, for me. And it's just been, like, amazing for me. And it really right-sized me, you know? And it made me really realize that I need to put a little bit more between me and the drink, right? But the one thing that I realized through all that is that when you got nothing to lose, you don't bullshit, you know? And I got a lot of that from those people. There was a long period in my sobriety when I would go to meetings and I would say, this was early in sobriety, and I've shared this before, where I would say what I thought other people wanted to hear me say or what sounded good. And it was a waste of breath. I shouldn't have even been saying it. I should have just been sitting there and listening and taking it in, which is why my sponsors in early sobriety would say to me, shut your mouth and open your ears because you have nothing to share, right? Well, when I started going to these other meetings, I shut my mouth and I opened my ears and I started listening to these people's stories. And their stories were no different than mine, okay? We might have grown up differently. We might live differently. You know, we might look differently. But our stories were very, very similar. And the story was that we loved drugs and alcohol and we used them to mute us, to grieve with, to be our best friend, to have them be, you know, have a good time with, but mostly to escape and not have to deal with reality, whatever the circumstances of that reality looked like, right? And so I think for me, the one thing that I've always put between me and the drink is that I was told in early sobriety, you always have to make your sobriety a priority. Like, put it above everything else. Because if you're not sober, you're not going to have the house. If you're not sober, you're not going to have your friends. You're not going to have your family. You're not going to have any of this, right? And I think when I started being around a lot of people that had lost everything as a result of that, when I hadn't been around that for the last 10 years or, you know, whatever, 5 years, what I realized was it took me back to where I was when I first got sober, you know? And it really reminded me of how grateful I am for my sobriety. I live out loud because I am so incredibly grateful for my sobriety. Anybody can do it, okay? It's a simple program for complex people. And however you do it, I'm not just saying that a 12-step program is the only way to do it, but I'm incredibly grateful for my sobriety, you know? And those people gave me back my gratitude, you know? Those friends of mine that shared their stories, these men that were living in, you know, recovery centers for 2 years at a time, okay? That were living in these recovery centers where they had to work for the recovery center every day for their bed, you know, for their bed and food and things like that. And they were doing it just to stay sober. I thought, man, these are people that are really fighting for their sobriety. They're really willing to go the lengths. What lengths are you willing to go to? What are you putting between you and the drink? And that changed it for me. I started to need to put a lot more between me and the drink. I started to need to do a lot more for my sobriety, right? But one of the things I've always known is it's about that scenario of sitting at that bar. I know who I am in my mind, right? Like, and I've, you know, through the years been like, well, maybe I got sober, you know, young enough that maybe I'm not really an addict. Maybe it was a phase of mine. I know who I am. I know who I am at 51, almost 52 years old, sitting on this bed talking to you guys today. I know that I could go into a bar and drink a drink and walk out and prove that to myself. But what would be the point? Because after that liquor hit my tongue, it's all over. And I know that. One is too many and 1,000's never enough. I would be in my head as soon as that first sip of that drink hit. Yes, I could walk out of that bar and probably prove it to somebody, but I'd be looking for the next bar right around the corner because I'd already proved it. And there's nothing to gain from that, right? And what I've always known is I am not successful at drinking and using drugs. It does not work for me. I don't know why it works for other people. It does. I have a lot of people in my life that successfully drink. I have people that I know that successfully smoke pot. I know people that successfully recreationally use other drugs from time to time, and it works for them. And they maintain their jobs and their relationships. They don't get in trouble with the law, and they're fine. It does not work that way for me. I destroy everything and everyone around me when I use, including myself, mostly myself. And it doesn't work, right? I have a blessed life today as a result of my sobriety. I have to focus on what I have today, and I have to put that between me and the drink. And always remember that truth, that it is never going to work for me. And not deceive myself into thinking otherwise. you know? And I think it's a really valid question. You know, between us, whatever it is, maybe it's not addiction for you, between you and whatever is going to keep you from falling apart, what are you putting between that? What are you doing to make sure that that doesn't ever happen? What's your safety net, you know? And I think it's important for us to think about those things and whatever we're going through. And with recovery, if you're in recovery, to think about, what am I putting between me and the drink or me and the use? You know, and ask yourself that question. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. I love you, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.